months since we had the first of these workshops, um, and there's a lot happened. But I'd be interested to know from people what their experience has been this year, and whether you've actually had any success of doing digital handover in a way that the clients have, that people are actually using what you've provided. So just whilst I'm trying to get teams to work, has anybody got any contribution on that? It sounds not.
I can answer halfway to that, George, with anecdote, and that is working with Landsec. I've done 2 handovers to them, digital handover at stage 6. I've got one coming up next Friday. It's just one story of a building information handover. Never hear anything back from them. As you know, I approached them last year, George, and just said, by the way, there's this good solution called Active Plan. Never heard from them. And I hear mixed stories, really. I think about usually through these meetings that you tend to lead, George, is that some people say that only a small sector of the UK building owners, let's call them, are actually handling the handover data, and a lot of other people are either not using it. I think you even said yesterday, George, it's sort of there's evidence that there's a lot of the information isn't getting used by the FM teams and whatever. Is that right?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, one of the things that's come out of this since we started it back in April is to actually ask people on the ground whether people are actually, the asset management teams, whether they're using the information that people are putting a hell of a lot of work into creating. And the reality, the feedback that we've been getting is very, very few. So the we then need to look at why that's the case, and that's obviously what we're trying to address here, isn't it? And we've got a schools group, for example. We've been looking at schools because there's a lot of investment gone into schools. What can we do about that?
George,
Right,
you've got 3 people with hands up. Do you want to take them now or after you've done your thing?
Yes, no, that's fine. Yeah, sorry.
Gordon, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to sort out my mic. All that I would say to you is, having introduced a bit of small tech that just delivers into this kind of workstream process in any building or large MEP heating or cooling system, I can tell you that I said to somebody last week, earlier this week, that it was 9 years since the original concept of the device was introduced to the client, but we got a call last week to say, yeah, I used you some time ago. 9 years ago, before they're adopting a bit of innovative tech that delivers digital data every single 7 hours, showing them evidentially how the asset is performing. 9 years, right? We've got clients that have said, if I had £1 for every time they say proof of concept, we need proof concept. How many names of people do we need to give you that are adopting this? But you individually as an organisation need to prove concept within the boundaries of your organisation. So nobody's really embracing it full scale. And that's only a microcosm of a data set that feeds into this whole digital deliverable process. So I can tell you that exponentially those sales growth figures are considerable, but we're still scratching the surface. And if I don't know what that does for confidence of us doing what we're doing here, but it does kind of compound the fact that people don't know about the data is available, and then they're scared stiff about the data when it is available because they don't truly understand what that process delivers. But that some of that's down to us to make sure that we've got to educate the client to make sure that they're aware of it and how to use it.
That's a really interesting point, actually, isn't it? They don't like it when they haven't got it, but they're scared of it when they have got it. That's Pierre.
Yeah, I think just from my point of view, the idea of the digital handover is the input, the process, and the output. And I'd really like to see a working model, just with events that might be milestones or events that might be a specific submission of a document or whatever. And what is it that goes in? How does it get managed, and what comes out? Because I think in some cases, we lack a sense of reality with the document that we typically use, and how does it connect up to what's precedent and antecedent. Just that there would be, for me, a series of a database that could actually open up that discussion and start putting some core documents in there and say, this is what you need to actually see in the document. And the reason behind that is just then it gets a more cohesive understanding across the whole sector. Because I think that's the one problem, is that if you don't have a consistent delivery, you end up falling in everybody doing their own thing. And you know, if you had things structured in a report, everybody would understand that. That's just my opinion right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, good morning. So when George mentioned that, I thought, well, what's the question that you're actually asking? Because in order to tease out responses, when we started this process 20 odd years ago, the reason we got involved by a client was because of the amount of time they were spending populating the systems that they were using. So the handover data was to be used to actually speed that process up. And that's still the case today. A very good reason. What they want to do is speed up the process. And in order for them to do that, they need to be able to trust the data, and it actually to have a process where they can actually convert data coming in into what the system needs to. How do they ingest that data so that they do get are able to hit the ground running? Now, I'm talking about planned preventative maintenance systems primarily, because those seems to be the ones. Now, the second thing is that the client organization usually outsources that responsibility, and so you've got a number of FM contractors who are using different systems, but they all have the same problem. They need to ingest the data, and therefore when we say, are you using this data, are we actually asking the right question? Are your organized parties that you're engaging, are they using the data, or are they going off and doing a new survey? Because that's the big cost, is that, and they're doing it for one of two reasons. One, they didn't know the data existed, and two, they don't know whether there's no verifiable way of trusting that data because it's never been tested. Those are the big things that I see as a problem at the moment. The second thing is that the deep dive into documentation happens when there's a problem in the building, as far as I can see. Other than the standard things like, what's your cleaning regimes and everything, or what surfaces have you got. But when something starts, water starts spilling out of a toilet, then you want to find the plumbing system. You need the schematics. You need to know where those things are, and that's when you suddenly discover it's not readily available. And it's part of this thing about, is the data ever tested before it's actually handed over? And if it is, because part of that testing will actually prove where the holes are, and also whether it's going to be fit for purpose. And that's what I just wanted to contribute.
Kevin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm interested in a few comments there, especially the one about scared. I think scared is a very important word to consider. That having recently done a digital handover, I think everyone in the whole equation is scared to death of having transparent information. I think the construction companies are very scared of finding out they're going to get sued for something they should or shouldn't have done. I think the FM contractor is often scared of getting honest information because it wants to live in a world of non-transparency where it can, not be held accountable for things. And I think the lack of understanding across the whole of that equation means that people just talk in riddles and don't really, want to get to grips with it. And I think until it's in a situation where you can literally plug the data into a CMMS CAFM system so that it immediately becomes an operable maintenance plan, I think it's always going to be that way. I think people are actually avoiding, being accountable because they don't want to be accountable. They are scared very much of, what it might show them.
Absolutely. George, are you ready now?
Yeah.
Okay, Gordon, can I ask you to be brief?
Yeah, it was just merely that point of just putting the text, sorry, Richard, where does CAFM and CMS fit into BIM? And then just picking up on anybody that missed BAM's use of digital technology yesterday, maybe needs to be mentioned at some point, George, for anybody that missed it.
No, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing, part of what I want to try and get from today is for us to be understanding what other people are doing, so that we can start to, learn and reuse that. So, right. So this is also intended for people that are new to this workshop. So, I mean, Kevin's been to a couple in the past, but I don't think you've been too busy, I think, to be able to attend too many, haven't you, Kevin? But so what have we achieved to date since last April? I think one of the things that I've certainly learned is that we, rather than rely on the theory of what's possible, we need to look in practical terms of being what's actually being delivered. Because the challenge is that we've got people, like Julian and Pierre, who know how to actually create models effectively, and also have got the passion and the interest in doing so. And yet, on many projects, people, are really using it just to produce drawings in many cases, and they'll use the quickest and easiest way of achieving that. And the overall, we recognise that shouldn't be the case, but that is actually what's happening. So therefore, we need to be pragmatic, I think, rather than simply hope that things are going to improve. The BIM in AM surveys that we've been doing since April are telling us that it's not working for asset teams, as we've just been discussing. No matter all this effort that's being put in, something's missing from that to enable that to happen. And my pragmatic way of looking at that is accept that it's not working rather than try and change the industry, and use what we have, but use it effectively. So, and this is a bit of heresy for me, because I think most of you know me. I'm very much trying to push forward with getting people to do things properly. But in practice, we also need to make sure we recognise that these projects are under huge pressure, and are there simpler ways of us doing that? So that's what we've been trying to work towards doing. The meeting that we had last April, what we agreed, these were the next steps: to form the Golden Thread Task Force, to really use that to standardise expectations industry-wide. And I think we've done a pretty good job on that. We've been doing that for the last 9 months, and some of you on this call have put a lot of effort into that, and I recognise that. Also, to engage with the Health and Safety Executive, with the regulator and MHCLG, to feed back a collective view as to what's going on. And you'll see that we've had some success on that as well. And also encourage FM involvement from earlier in the process, and also to define the operational schema much earlier in the process. So we've been doing quite a lot of work on that area as well. We've formed a number of work stream groups, and the work streams essentially are task and finish work streams. So we've had a lot of enthusiasm for that. The digital asset capture one, the last main one that we did, apart from the one we did yesterday, was back in I think it was June, which we've carried on using digital asset capture on all of the other work streams. So we've got a work stream that's been looking at PFI handback. The golden thread generally has been an important one. We've had work streams on data engineering and the use of AI. We've done quite a lot in the last few months on safety critical assets. So we've refreshed a lot of the guidance that we've got on that. We've started the data center project has slowed, but it's going to kick off again. But we've got a data center project underway at the moment, and there's another one that's starting in Slough that we should be able to include something on that. There was a meeting on that yesterday.
George, Kevin's got his hand up. Do you want to take questions now or at the end?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
You can't see it. Kevin.
Yeah, so I didn't know if you wanted me to sort of comment as you were going through, George, or as you say, whether you wanted to wait until the end. It's up to you, really.
You can contribute now, Kevin, please. Yeah.
I was going to go back to the first slide, really, in terms of the digital information. Having recently sort of been part of a handover of a first phase of a £50 million healthcare project, it was very evident that the information that was available, following the kind of guidelines, was really created by the architect. For the building, the architect had done a good job, understood BIM fairly well, and had made an attempt to really identify everything within the building. The building contractor really didn't have, the main contractor really didn't have a great deal of knowledge, employed a third party to act as their kind of BIM expert, and they didn't really understand it either. And I got the impression very much, and have gone through the analysis of everything, that the problems are all to do with all of the subcontract packages. The subcontractors are asked to input their information after the work is complete, and they don't really understand, how to identify assets in the correct way. So all the information that's coming over to the FM contractor is really about the substructures and the building, rather than the things that they're actually expected to maintain, such as the HVAC systems or the air conditioning systems.
Kevin, I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? Because that's exactly the experience that we've had. Yeah. And what I'm finding is that exactly what I mean, I couldn't have said that better, really. That that's the big challenge that we need to help engage with, to encourage and support the M&E installers in particular, so that they can actually do that easily.
Yeah, I think it's also, you mentioned schema. I think schema is a very interesting term, that it's about the structure of the asset as well, in terms of maintaining that asset. That many of the subcontractors don't really understand the system they're installing. They understand, an individual air handling unit or individual reheat coil, but they don't understand, when it's all plugged together to form a complete system, how you should represent that within a schema in order to then plug it into the maintenance system. So I think it's that lack of understanding, because they're not maintenance contractors, they're installation contractors. And, for an instance, I had lots of BIM information on the handover, identifying every single length of ductwork with its own individual asset number, every spigot that came through the ceiling with its own individual asset number. Now,
Yeah, that doesn't really help, does it? I think you've frozen.
Sorry, can I just say, if you want to comment, please comment on what we're looking at, as opposed to so much the last comment, because we're going to go off in tangents. Say what you want to say if that's the case until after George is finished, maybe.
Yeah, but to be fair, I think you're quite right, Richard. I didn't see Kevin's hand up, so
No, it's fine. I just don't want to. We don't want to go off into rabbit holes, do we?
no. But what? Yeah, I agree. We need to move forward. Gordon.
Kevin, just to re-emphasise and support what you said, NBS, National Buildings, had architects at a meeting that they had held back suppliers from MEP equipment. And NBS said, no, this is just for architects. But one of the biggest architects in London, the head of the architectural practice, said, we need to speak more to our MEP partners, because it's the MEP stuff that's going wrong. It's not the fabric, the building doesn't fall down. The structure doesn't actually vary that much. There's not structurally, there's stuff that doesn't differ. It's the stuff that moves. It's the stuff that works. It's the stuff that puts water, that puts air, that puts all the stuff around the building. That's the stuff that generally goes wrong. But it's exactly as Kevin was saying. And I don't know how you solve that, but without the willingness of these subcontractors and main contractors to get these packages digitally transformed.
Yeah, I think
some of that, what George said earlier on, is also relevant. I think we need to change the narrative, but we can only do that by kind of proving to people where it is being adopted and working. And by definition, people will then adopt it. But we see so many MEP contractors across the United Kingdom, and some of them regionally, covering up what they think they have a problem. They all have the same problem, but they just don't know it because they're not talking about it.
I think a lot of the things I have to say is to do with the relationship side of contracts and the way that everything's constructed. It's always been about punishing one another. It's always been about the one who makes the money is the one who manages to have the best quantity surveyors and so on and so forth. And that whole attitude means that it doesn't really translate into BIM, which is about cooperation and collaboration and everybody sharing information honestly. So it's a bit like giving pirates, something that was written by the Navy. It just doesn't work because it doesn't fit their way of thinking. And I think that's, one of the key challenges. As much as the technology is there now, and it's relatively easy to hook it all together. It's about getting people to buy into it and be honest in the relationships.
Is that transparency thing that was mentioned earlier, do you think? Does it relate to that? You said the pirates and the Navy?
I think so. I think it is a little bit of sort of Lord of the Ring. It's very much my precious. People want to be the owners of BIM and they don't really want to share it with anybody else in the relationship during a construction project. But I think it is about relationships and about punishment, about legal side of things and so on.
How'd you solve it?
I think you have to simplify it. I think you have to almost present it on a plate. You have to say, look, forget everybody trying to have an input. Somebody takes the lead and somebody provides the data all the way through the project. I've seen now companies appointing a data manager, whose role is to kind of pull all the parties together. But I think it's almost far better to say, let's take that to one side and there's a separate entity that's responsible for that data all the way through the project. And they're measured on the outputs at the end of that project, what they provide to each of the interested parties.
That could also almost be called the golden thread.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, the golden
absolutely.
Contractor, as it were.
We've got some examples of that later, but I'm very keen to keep this conversation going, Richard, if you don't mind, because I think we're drawing out from it.
I'm just trying to obviously keep the meeting moving.
Of course.
Can I just add a really quick anecdote?
Yeah.
It's I think the client.
It's a problem with your microphone, Chris.
Is that any better?
Yes, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think it's the client needs to take responsibility for the data they need. So, it's been a long time since I've been at L&Q, and when I looked at FM's Handover spreadsheet, it was just like, was almost like a silly coding sheet, how many floors, how many lifts, and that's all they had. They had all their documentation on Keystone. But if you're running a building, you need to know which processes you're going to do, and that should give you an understanding of what data you're going to need to operate the building. And then essentially there needs to be some sort of data store and master area. So even if you have subcontractors, you potentially, once you know what data you actually need, you can tell them we need to capture this, and they can have handheld devices to sort of scan things to marry it up. But sort of just getting them to collect it in isolation and then trying to integrate it with an EFM system is going to be difficult. So essentially that drive of what you need to maintain and operate the building needs to be your client's responsibility, and then all the subcontractors know what they're going to need to collect, and then potentially you've got the technology which will help them scan to say this is in this position, this is its asset number, this is its model number. But it sort of got to go through from that point. But if you're
Chris,
just trying to sort of
Chris, you still got a big problem with your microphone, but I think we absolutely get your point. I'd just like to respond to what Christine was saying there with something that, it actually comes through from also what Kevin mentioned, and that is the information requirements needs to be set out very clearly at the outset, but not just the information requirements set out. It also needs to be delivered in a form that can then be auditable. So it's all very well writing into BIM specifications, the sort of things that BIM managers do in terms of saying this is how we want all this information to come back. But in many cases, certainly in my experience, people don't follow those requirements. They should, and contractually they should, and they could probably be financially challenged for that. But in my experience, that often doesn't happen. So the result is that because they're not quite following what's required, it all falls apart. Now, the other challenge is that, just building on that, buildings are designed typically around systems. And then when it goes into construction, the information is procured from subcontractors by work package. And there's a disconnect at that point between the way the information is required from a design perspective and how it's procured. So we end up with, certainly our experience is that we end up with a lot of information broken down by work package, which actually needs to then be reinterpreted back into systems. Now, that type of challenge is something that we're trying to address. Addy,
Can I just add a quick anecdote?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just based on loosely on what Kevin recently said on having information managers and someone outside. Just quickly, I'm working as an information manager on a project. So let's assume I should be able to instruct subcontractors on what they need to do with drawings, models, and information. I told a subcontractor who's quite difficult, you need to rename all of your drawing files. And he said, well, has the client, has basically the lead designer approved that? And he was basically really saying, just because you, the information manager, tells me to do it, I want to hear it from the actual design lead. And that's a difficulty. And he actually asked to see the minutes from the meeting to see if the instruction was in there. And I didn't give them to him because I kind of thought I should have, I should be. It's always the case with information management. I think you have to be given the authority at the beginning with everybody saying no. If the information manager asks for it, that's it. That was my anecdote. There you go.
Agreed.
Very quickly, George, I think I was meant to speak. If I spoke before Christine and your last, what you said last time would have been ideal. I think the thing is, the subcontractors, from where I can see this, they're after making their money. They don't have time. So in order for them to cooperate, you need to give them the granular requirements of what we need. It needs to get to the point where it's all broken down. And if it's not well specified, sorry, if it's not well specified at the beginning, we're not going to get it. Simple, because once they got the contract, they just want to do what they need to do and get out. What you're asking for, they're going to do the barest minimum. But if it's clearly defined, granularly to the level where it's not that difficult for them to do it, or it doesn't cost them more to do it, and it is built into the specification and requirements at the beginning, we might get somewhere.
I think I absolutely agree with you, Addy. But the other thing that we need to do is make sure that we're auditing that information as it's being provided. Because what happens is that it's left until the end, by which time that specialist subcontractor's probably gone and working on another job, right? So therefore, when you find out that the information is not fit for purpose, then it's too late. Yeah. And then you're under pressure because you're under pressure to do the handover, as Andy Coldridge has explained a couple of times, where he's put under pressure to sign off the Regulation 38 information, for example. Yeah. And he's given 2 days to do that, or a day, which is madness. That information could have been checked and validated months before. You don't need to wait until the end. And obviously all the processes are there in place to be able to do it. But it's a matter of enabling that. Yes. I'm going.
Thank you.
With everybody's permission, in a bit, I'm going to ask Tim Aiken, one of my colleagues, to actually step through the audit process that we've been operating on a couple of schemes, because what we're trying to do is understand from everybody, how are you actually checking that the information that you expect to find is actually being provided. And I've just seen that Jim Watts has put his hand up. So I would very much like you, Jim, to say how Waits does it, but I think it's Pierre next. You're on mute, Pierre.
Apologies. Okay. I think the key thing, and I've raised it in a couple of the meetings this week as well, is about defining everything that's required so that you understand it. But in order for that to work, potentially the information manager should be on the client side, but running in parallel with the lead consultants. And what that's meaning is that there's somebody who's continuously holding the information management, the inputs, the process, and the outputs. The reason for the benchmarks is really important, because that's what you're going to work on the performance of everything. Because one of the things that I've encountered is between expectations, assumptions, and reality. And that's where the big chasm is. We're not conscious about what that subcontractor actually requires. So one of the areas I'd like to have is that you can package everything from a system into a package, into work breakdown structures, anything you want with that data. And it means that you can apply it in the different cases packaged for the consumer. And that's really something that I think we should be doing, because we can then audit that. How did they respond? What did we get out?
Absolutely agree.
And the lessons learned. And really important. Thank you.
Afam.
Morning, guys. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah.
Having listened to everybody and what we're trying to say, I think the way I look at it is about, we have to leave the what's it called, field management and compliance management system to the client, to govern by the client. Thereby, if we design our software in such a way that the client owns the software and gives the contractors access and restrict them on how to upload information, exactly how to upload the information, this will solve the problem. Because when you rely on a contractor to send you a spreadsheet or a PDF document, you have to keep chasing him. You know, they'll come up with different reasons why they cannot do it or why they're still waiting for something else. But if you design your documentation system whereby they have to go through that, there won't be a misfiling. If you want to submit a golden thread information if you want to upload a golden thread information to a system, you have when you choose that project, you have to follow the document type which is stated for you. You have to choose the document you want to upload and what the title of the document and where it's going to, whether it's O&M or golden thread.
Afam, yeah.
Yeah.
So I understand where you're coming from with that. Afam works for Enfield Council, is it? Afam?
Yeah, I work for him. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I understand the desire for that, and I've come across it quite a lot, right? In practice, that doesn't work as far as the golden thread is concerned. And the reason for that is that if you've got maybe a fire stopping contractor who's going to work on your project, yeah, they're only going to work on it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, right? And therefore they're producing their information for you and for 50 other clients that they're working for, right? Okay. So therefore what's really important is the quality of the information.
I know, yeah. But if we look at
sorry, Afam, if I could just finish. So the quality of the information is really important. So therefore, they need to be using, in my view, they need to be using software that they're familiar with, that their people are familiar with, and but the key thing that you need as a client is for that information to be delivered to the quality that you need and for it to be automatically checked. And I absolutely agree with you that the client needs to be the one that is verifying that information. But if we're asking people to use 10 or 15 or 20 different systems because they've got 10 or 20 or 50 different clients, they'll make a mistake. That's my view.
Okay, I get that, but in this age of AI and APIs, systems could be integrated to talk to each other. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to physically or manually be doing it. All we want to do is just to restrict people from misfiling and providing the right information. So if the client owns it via a field management system, whereby the delivery is governed from the client side. I'm looking at it from the fifth pillar of sustainability: institutional transparency and governance. You understand?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not looking at it, you know, as in trying to restrict people to one software. No. So software can talk to each other via API. I can have a software that talks to active plan and get information from you. Even if you have the information stored in your system, I can see them from my system.
Yeah, we're using APIs all the time, Afam. So yeah. I absolutely understand that. What I'm saying though is that we've got to look at what works for the people that are actually carrying out the work. Because if you ask them to use multiple different systems, we know that this doesn't work.
Because what I'm saying is,
it's not the theory, Afam. It's the practice. Yeah.
No, the practice. What I'm saying is that from my experience from Enfield, and what I see with contractors, you understand, I find that there's a need for a field management system and a compliance system.
Oh no, absolutely.
Not just asset management systems. The project should be managed and governed from the board, from the client. You understand? Sure. So the governance, because we don't have any governance on the field. We rely on the contractor to give us information. There's no governance in the field. I'm a project manager. I'm always in the field. I know what I see.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Who's next? Benedicte.
Everyone, sorry, I sound a bit hoarse because my voice is, but I'm Happy New Year to everyone as well. I kind of agree with some of the things that have been said, but I'm speaking from a client's perspective. So my background is in construction, been in construction for over 20 years as an information manager before I started working with my current employer, who's a developer house owner. asset owner. And because I work on the building safety side of things, I'm mostly working on our remedial and post-occupation projects and not the new builds, even though I have my hands in those. But the experience of working on our remedial and post-occupation projects, some of the things that have been said is our current experience, which is that even where we've had work done, we cannot find any of our records for the works that have been done. And even where we have the records, we cannot use them in a meaningful way because they've not been collated properly, if you like. So what we immediately did was try to solution this. And I've spoken to you, George, about this, where we created a checklist of documents as a minimum of documents that must be given to us at handover. What we also found was a problem was the way these documents were being handed over again, because they've been handed to us piecemeal, where sometimes even the people supplying the information have gone bust, and we no longer have access to their systems, or the main contractor managing the work for us did not mandate their subcontractors to provide or produce these documents. We didn't also have this document. So I'm talking about skill gaps now. I'm talking about gaps in systems, and I'm also talking about gaps in the way information is being procured. So what we did is we rewrote the contracts for one of our major works going on is our fire remediation program for cladding works. What we've done on that regime is we actually put a stop. Even though we started work, we put a stop to contracts as they were being done, and we started a new regime. We have now rewritten the contract to ensure that, in the way you described, George, any information that is coming from a subcontractor of a principal contractor, the information is provided in a meaningful way that can be used in a meaningful way. We've actually prescribed to a very granular detail what we require in terms of documentation and asset information, because what was happening was, because we didn't prescribe it, we were just being given whatever. And when we went back to them, they were challenging us to say, well, you didn't prescribe how this information should be provided to you. So what we've done is we prescribed to a very granular detail in the contract the way information should be handed over to us. We've also procured a CDE environment for this program because it's such a massive program. And the reason we did that also is because, in the way a gentleman spoke earlier, was because on the projects, the information was not being managed properly. The current CD was owned by the main contractor. And again, we run into problems because, again, they told us we didn't prescribe. So what I'm trying to say is that, as an asset owner, what we've quickly found is that if we are not prescribing how information should be managed, how information should be produced, and how information should be handed over to you, what you get is what you get. And also, if you do not have ownership of the systems that are housing your documents, you stand at a very big risk should your supply chain go bust. That's the end of my contribution. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Benedicta. Pav. Oh, right. Before I just hand over to Pav, we've up. This meeting's not gone quite the way I planned it, because I was going to show you quite a lot of what work we've been doing, but I don't know what you think, but I think this has been very useful, because the whole point about the working groups and the work streams is to share experiences. Now, what I would like to do, that our overall strategy with this is to bring together people that are interested in moving things forward. And I think the fact that you're attending today indicates that you're interested in participating. So what I'm going to suggest is that what we want to try and do is form teams who can work on some of these things together, and we can identify some projects that we can work on together, and therefore be able to form groups that can deliver and work in a consistent way. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment, I'm going to ask you to let me know whether you're interested. For example, schools. We've got a group of main contractors, including Jim's company, Waits, is one of them. But we've got, you can see there, we've got Wilmot Dixon, we've got Bowman Kirkland and people. And what they're all doing at the moment, they're delivering schools following the Department for Education's standards. They're producing the information, delivering it, and none of the schools are using the information that they're being provided, which is really, really concerning. Now, what we've also found is that one of the challenges there is that there are technical advisors who are interpreting what are very prescriptive and detailed standards that have come out of the Department for Education, but they're interpreting them differently. So the result is that they can be working on one scheme, on one project, and their supply chain is trained to provide the information that's needed. But they then win another school and it gets changed. So we've also now engaged with the technical advisors. So the reason I'm saying this is that if you're interested at all in schools, then that might be something. If you could put your name in put schools in the chat, and we'll include you in that particular work stream. We're also doing the same with healthcare. We've obviously done a lot with residential. So if you're interested in healthcare or residential, put that in the chat as well, and we'll invite you along to a work stream on that. My plan at the moment is if I can act as the marriage broker between you, if we can arrange a one-to-one meeting, maybe over the next 2 or 3 weeks or something like that, just for about 15 minutes, I can understand what your interest is. I know quite a lot of you, but not everybody. So if we can arrange a one-to-one meeting just to go through that, then I can plug together people that are willing to work together. So, for example, we've got the AWABS meeting this afternoon, which is the one about the new damp and mold legislation. And we've already got people that are forming collaborative groups on AWABS law. So if we can do that maybe with schools and healthcare and prisons and other types of schemes, I think that would be a good thing to do. Sorry, Pav.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everyone. Could I just bring a slightly different aspect to this work that we're doing, is just starting with the why. Why are we gathering the data? I don't think that's absolutely clear, because basically the problem we've got is we're not assuming that the clients are intelligent clients, and I haven't seen a guidance to support clients to base the work that we're gathering. Are we gathering the data for the sake of data, or are there assets behind this which are either end of life, safety critical, or linked to fire or other regulatory responsibilities? So just my bit of a request is we need to have a risk-based approach very similar to the HSE, where we give a context of why you're gathering data in the components that you're gathering it for. The other basic issue that you've got is golden thread is a new terminology for new buildings that are coming across. We either need to expand that terminology, because you're talking about existing assets of education, schools and everything else, which are reaching the end of their PFIs, or hospitals that are reaching end of PFIs. The issue that you've got with completion of a PFI or end of project is there's certain assets within that building which are approaching end of life. And if you don't have the correct information about those assets, you don't know whether they need renewal, maintenance, removal. Are they a risk to the project? What condition are they? And I don't believe we're giving the client that priority list of this is why you're gathering the data. And that's possibly where George, where you've said that the school's not using the information because they don't know what the information is actually for. It's actually to protect the client from the risk associated with X, Y, and Z assets that you've got. And I haven't seen any data handover. I've seen lots of data being created, health and safety files and everything else, but nothing that gives the context of a significant risk report of what's the priority and what the impact of the gathering of this data is. So
Pav,
that would be useful. Thank you.
Pav, what you've just said there is exactly what we're doing at the moment. So we've not had time, and I don't think if anybody's interested in what Pav's talking about there, which is what is the benefit of having this information, we've actually got a group that's just started, that's going through and turning that into tangible value. So what is what's the value? Why are we doing the golden thread? And we're, like you say, Pav, the golden thread really is generic. Forget that it's only statutory for residential. It's all about integrated information. And therefore, what we've now got, which I'll show you just a couple of screens in a moment, but we've actually got a team looking at that at the moment. So if you're interested in the commercial and the risk side of things, I think put risk into the chat. And we had quite a lot of people yesterday from the fire safety or fire strategy group signed up to that. So if you're interested in having some sort of tangible value for the information that is being gathered, please put risk into the chat and we'll invite you. Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, so if I'd introduce myself first, Jim Watts. I work for Waste Construction. I'm coming from the viewpoint of a principal contractor, which is obviously highly valued. I think I've heard a lot of talk today about subcontractors, as is normal. I would probably urge you to concentrate your language around getting the principal contractors to make sure it happens. The principal contractors are those that employ those subcontractors, and it's actually our obligation to make sure they're fine. George, when you mentioned earlier that you'd like your O&M manuals in systems, as opposed to how we would generally do it, as in probably names of subcontractors, it kind of broke my heart, really, because it's such an easy thing to rectify. We were only looking at it from our own perspective. And I think that the reason I've come onto these calls on the infrequent occasion when I can is there's been a suspicion that what we've producing for the last 100 years hasn't really been fit for your purpose, but it was trying to get an appreciation of what you needed and where you were coming from. If you could get to the point where you actually tell us what you need. Yeah, if somebody could write down what they need in a kind of specific content, when we price the job, we can allow for it. More importantly, when we do set up all our own subcontracts, we can make sure it's there. If I can try and give you a little bit of encouragement, every principal contractor in the country is suffering from legacy issues at the moment.
Yeah.
Every principal contractor at the moment has had to go back and look at his O&M manuals and realise how inadequate they are.
Yeah.
Every principal contractor in the industry at the moment is coming to the realisation that record keeping and information is as important as the building itself. But that is a massive cultural change. So when I hear clients talk about, we want you to use our system and we want to do this, on any given day, we've probably got about 20,000 individual workers working on our sites across the country. If we have to work to different systems, we've actually got no chance of educating them in any consistent way. So I'm supporting your point, George.
Yeah.
Our intention at the moment, we're designing a common data system or environment that we will use on every single wage project across the country. And it will be how we run our jobs from the common data environment for drawings, distribution, correspondence, method statements, collecting golden thread, the whole lot. When we reach clients who want us to use their systems, we'll actually be saying, we're going to use our systems for running our jobs, but we'll give you what information you need from that system.
Yep.
In terms of the O&M manuals and the building of the O&M manuals, you don't get a whole load of information dumped on the end of the project. We agree that's an issue. We agree it's an issue for us. We agree that all principal contractors that don't give it enough diligence. The culture we're trying to change is that the building of the information and the gathering of the information is part of the site manager's roles in his day-to-day weekly meetings with the subcontractor. So we're going to start populating as we build the job. With the system that we're using, that we're developing, we're actually we're in favour of giving clients access to that O&M manual as we build it.
Sure.
And that I mean, that's from a principal contractor's perspective, that's where we are.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Gordon, is it quick? I'm sorry to. I'm just trying to move on. Gordon, have I offended you?
So no, you haven't, George. You could never offend me. I was going to show you something to just kind of validate what some of the people are saying, in the sense of show me something that tells me it's worthwhile, if you like. I don't know whether I've got the authority to do so, and I'm not trying to just show any particular device or any process. I'm just showing you data that shows you what varies in a construction program, you know, from a point of practical or nearing practical completion to then an operational phase. Can I just show you one screen?
One screen.
If I can get it, if Teams works, because I've had the same issue that some of you guys have had. So let me just, I mentioned in the text before about HNTAS and DESNES. So is everybody familiar with HNTAS and DESNES? Just, I don't know, I'll assume you're not, okay? But HNTAS is Heat Network Technical Assurance Scheme as we chase carbon reduction in heating and cooling in systems. And effectively what we're trying to do is basically understand the operational heating and cooling systems in residential property in the United Kingdom when they're on heat networks. So you've got a residential development that's got maybe 140 flats, but they do one phase and they start it off in January. So they start the system running, they've got a wee bit of the activity. This is monitoring corrosion, right? So all the way through, there's not a lot happening. They do the first phase, they drop the temperature, and then they fit the second phase. Now, you don't have to be a brain surgery to suggest that that replicated data set there, where you've got no corrosion activity, the default there, and then you have replication of corrosion activity, which, because they're getting the data, they suddenly realize they have to do something to correct it and make sure they've got no corrosion activity thereafter. Now, that is a simple demonstration of how consistent systematic data generation over a long period of time validates the operational function of that system to manage the risk of corrosion in closed sealed systems. Your closed sealed systems should not corrode. They should not be corroding. We have had massive issues of corrosion in PFI in many, many instances throughout the United Kingdom, particularly. Why? Because we've done things wrong in a bad way. And I'm not going to tell you what my thoughts on that process is. If you want to hear more, have a chat with me or have a chat with somebody that knows what they're talking about. But that evidence of data management, and this is very innovative, although it's been introduced in 2017, but it's now in guidance as best practice. HNTAS, DESNES, now have this as a minimal or tantamount to a minimal requirement, and that doesn't include new installs of heat networks. This is for the 17,000 heat networks that all of the residential builders have got and installed, but are not maintaining, have just thrown it onto a maintenance contractor. They are going to have to generate this level of granular data, and most of them don't know that they have to. It's regulation in about April 2026. Okay. Regulation. It's not guidance, it's regulation.
Brilliant, thank you. Kevin, I'm going to press on if I may, and we'll pick up. Richard, are you able to check to see who's commented in the chats? Have people signed up for a follow-on?
Right, I've been waiting to ask you, is risk next steps?
No, risk is golden thread from yesterday.
Well, it's golden thread from yesterday. Okay.
Yeah, it's the benefit side of things. It's the benefit.
No, that's all right.
You
you were talking about putting figures around it. I thought that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, what do you want to know?
I'm just making sure that we've had a reasonable feedback so that we can follow back up with people afterwards, because obviously there's quite a lot that I wanted to show today that we don't have time to show now.
We've got some good. Yeah, we've got a lot of good comments in the chat. We've got 9 people who've signed up for.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is just one of the things that we want to try and do is understand if there's a better practice of the way we're auditing information. So as everybody's been saying, what's really important is to define clearly what information is needed and then check it that it's arriving. So what I'd like to do is just show 3 or 4 slides, but then I'm going to ask, I've got Tim Aiken, a colleague of mine. He's been working on a live job doing auditing, and I'd like him to share with you what his experience is and what the routes that we're using AI for to be able to move things forward. So is that okay with everybody? So what we're trying to do is to move assets from being passive. God, PowerPoint's not working now. Amazing. Right, let me just try again. I've had some interesting experiences today with the teams.
Well, I was thrown off for 10 minutes. I thought maybe it was by popular vote.
Were you really?
Yeah, that's why I've had to come in. It's been back on for housing. I couldn't get on as myself.
That happened to me, Richard.
Yeah.
This just isn't working. When I start sharing, it stops working. I'll try again. If not, I'll just have to hand straight over to Tim.
If it doesn't work, can you send it to me and I'll share it?
Is it not working? I can see now, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, transforms. Yeah, it was working just now.
No, it should go page.
As
soon as you click something.
Okay, let me. One last go.
Yes.
Okay, it's the build that's the problem, I think. So let me just work on the basis. What we're trying to do is change things from being dumb to smart. So, and what Jim was saying earlier, being able to reformat the information and present it in different ways is exactly what we should be doing. So then, Jim, you can collect information by work package, but by having the right metadata connected to each of the documents, then it can be presented in different ways. And also make it so that the information is machine readable and actionable. I'll assume that this probably won't work as a build. I'll just try it. Right. Okay, that's working now. So the point is, what typically happens is that at handover, we get some really good information, but it's not necessarily connected. And the result of that is it's very difficult to check and manage. So what we're doing is really trying to make it so that these various different golden threads can be integrated and viewed and used as a whole. And by doing that, it means that we can take information that's perhaps been produced for design and construction, and also be able to pick up information that is being captured during a technical submittal process. And then, but the key thing here, the key difference is that we're actually using 360 photography as the as-builts, so that we've got something simple for asset managers to be able to use and maintain. And the 360 photography, what we're doing is making it so it becomes smart. So we're adding intelligence to the 360 photograph so that it then becomes smart 360, it becomes searchable. And it also means that we can then tie that back into other processes. So technical submittals, you can even use it to navigate the O&M. And what we're also able then to do is to use, it's irrelevant which 360 cameras are being used. And in fact, in most cases, the information's already being captured by construction teams. I know, Jim, that you do this, don't you? So the information's already being captured. So what we really want to do is make sure that we can reuse that information easily. And the way we're using the 360s, we can use them for validating what's been installed, doing condition assessments, being able to use them for safety, fire risk assessments. So in other words, that's becoming the combination of the data is the way of doing that. So Tim, can I just hand over to you for 5-10 minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just now I've got to navigate. Is it presenting Teams from PowerPoint? I'll go try that. See what happens. And nothing. Present, yes. And preparing your slides. Okay. Right. Okay, how do we then get that to? Oh, that doesn't look very good, does it? Because it's got notes on and everything. How do we get?
No, there's no notes.
Oh, right. What it's presenting to me is different. What it's presenting to you. You're getting the full screen. Right. Yes. Okay. So if I. Right. Okay. So I did a build on there. When you said build doesn't work, I thought, oh, no. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we all know that this is a sort of thing. I mean, I've used BIM model as the. In a broader sense, rather than it being one entity, it's actually a whole series of data sets. But effectively, I think we're all a mismatch, which is what I'll demonstrate between what has handed over and then what is installed, and then the installed doesn't match the somebody else's data, and you go, well, which one's true? And so this is just really a summary of the consequences of that. So what we got on this particular project is that we got Kobe data, which was done against an agreed upfront specification of requirement that said this is what you need to provide. And then when we looked at it against for the doors, then we saw that this information was not actually tallying with the installers, the door manufacturers' information. For example, the door numbers didn't tally up. Where we expect to see an actual door number that everybody hangs their data on, that was empty. It's called tag number. That's one that says that the missing door number. So the white bit at the bottom is the actual door manufacturer's schedule. The number of door types that was in the Kobe data was too low a granularity, and the door manufacturer had actually created more. So that obviously created us a problem. Then when we went to look into detail, we can see here that we couldn't actually, we can see there that for the door type that was in the Kobe data, there are in fact 7 versions of it. And then where do you get these schedules in the O&M? Well, somebody's baked them into a PDF. So you've got the process of then extracting that PDF, trying to clean it all up. And if you haven't got the right tools, if you haven't got Adobe Professional, then you're left with all sorts of problems with trying to get spreadsheets out. Another door manufacturer, completely different schedule, but again, baked into their O&M manual, and then again had to be extracted. Now, you would have thought, right, okay, so that's one problem. The other problem was that actually in the BIM model itself, there were door numbers that actually were put in by the designers that actually hadn't been checked. So they were coming up wrong. They were door numbers that by their nomenclature should have been on different levels. So that creates more confusion. So what do we end up doing is you go, well, is this my problem? If I'm tasked with getting this working, what needs to be done to actually do it? So this is the process that we had to go through to reconstruct and sort out these issues. And of course, in Active Plan, we have a visual floor plan, a spatial model to work with, which helps. And then we can start to connect it up. I mean, in fact, effectively inside the Active Plan PIM, we're literally joining up all the dots. But those dots should already be joined up. So, but it does highlight where dots aren't joined, where things aren't joined up. And that we can also bring in the backdrops so we can start to see the discrepancies. But it doesn't help really, because it's just saying these are the problems and they should have been sorted out earlier. And why are we doing this? Well, if you've got a door manufacturer's schedule, then we can put that into the PIM, and then we click on the door, and hey presto, we can bring up the record for that schedule. But the keys must match. And if somebody's going to mess around with the keys, one of the things that the door manufacturer did was that on the door number, they then added on some doors an extra character at the end. So, and you know, pick that up, and you go, right, okay, was there a reason for doing this? You know, and there wasn't any reason for doing this other than that, but they did it. So you're left with that. Now, what George mentioned before was that we got a data dump of some, I don't know, not between 9 and 12 gigabytes of data. So I wrote a program that just did a quick analysis of that zip file, and you can do it, and it will also work on a folder structure. And believe it or not, they'd given us a data dump which had empty files. That's 0 length files. So no validation or care had been given as to what they'd given and what they were handing out. They were also providing files that nobody had software to open. So why are you doing that? And obviously what I call Russian dolls, they were handing over zip files, and inside zip files were more zip files and more zip files and more zip files. And it was just, but at least this program here, which literally takes less than a second to run, could give me an overview of just how well this was. And because it is a folder structure, it would also do an analysis to say, right, well, here are the unique named files, as opposed to files, because files appeared in multiple places inside the directory system. So going on from that, we ran a parallel AI project, because that's one of the things that I do. And we already had a set of instructions as to how to check an O&M, which we would then hand out to people and say, there's the O&M, here's a set of instruction template, go through it and see whether all this information is correct. So what we did there, or what I did there, was I converted that into an instruction set that I could then run against a large language model. And we could get it into a process, and it takes about 15 minutes. That's probably the longest for it to go through any O&M and produce a report. The idea is that what we did to run parallel is that we would then check what the AI did against what the human checker did. But when you're talking about going through, say, 30, 40 O&Ms 15 minutes ago, that's going to be a big time saving. Produce a report that then tells us what passes and fails, and also produces a physical report, so you get exactly the same content in terms of the report template that said this failed because of this. This is why I'm failing this section. And not only that, but the AI is able to then reference where in the O&M it's failing it. So it said, I found these things on here. This is why I've passed it, and this is why, or this is why I've failed it. And that's basically it. I hope that's covered the minutes there, George.
That's great, Tim. Thank you. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to also show, so this is building on from what Tim was just showing there, is that because we've then got that information into the database with the means to do chat GPT style questions, I was able to ask it the question, are all of the records provided for electrical safety for this particular building? And it actually went through and it told me what was there, and importantly, what isn't there, so that we could very quickly see whether, for example, Regulation 38 has actually been complied with, and if not, what's missing. So what I'm going to say, I think this should be something that's of interest to everybody, and we're happy to share with you what we're doing on that and get your input to it, because the value of this really is, it's not in the technology, it's knowing what the prompts are, what questions to ask, and also to have the right guardrails. So if you're interested in participating in that as an exercise, I think just put audit, Richard. Is that okay? If you could put audit in the chat, and we'll run a proper session rather than Tim just. Thank you for that, Tim. But we probably need to go into it in a bit more detail. And also, we'd like you to come to that meeting with tools that you are using, because I imagine that the everybody's at the moment thinking about ways that they can audit and validate this type of information and O&M information. We want to learn from. We want everybody to share their knowledge.
Yeah, can I just also mention, Georgia, for us, this is a journey. What I've shown is a research project that we're running to see, and we learnt a lot of lessons. And part of that process was also doing some data engineering. So, for example, in somebody's O&M, they would reference, here are all the documents or drawings. And what we did was to convert those to spreadsheets and then just run a program that said, well, if you've said you've provided this file, did you provide it? Is it in that data set there? Because we've got an awful lot of people providing a register or referencing documents that were not provided. Now, the other thing that we've learned from it is our going forward, and I think this has been mentioned before, was brought up before, what are you actually trying to achieve? And our O&Ms now are sort of really become a bit too vague. And should we actually be specifying these are data product packages that you need to provide for whatever work package you're doing, that is more specific and more relatable to the contractor or subcontractor, the installer, to be able to give you back, rather than being something generic. I'm not sure that the project that we did had used for 50% had used a generic template that was provided. And you think, well, that's great. Not filled in with any pre-populated with any of the data that they could have done. So the contractor then got the data that somebody else could have provided. They got that wrong. But they also then had sections that just weren't applicable, and sections that were missing that they should have had.
I think that's the point, really, isn't it? We're just overwhelmed with too much information. We all know that AI can help us get through that, but it needs to have very clear guardrails, and I think that's what we can contribute. Andy?
Yeah, George, I was going to say to you, what you showed me, can you send a copy?
Yeah.
I spent 3 days well, I wouldn't say validating, actually, just going through and just to determine that what I'd been sent was actually evident in the file. And quite often, well, I mean, we miss that the opportunity for that single source of truth or information when it's sent over on a WeTransfer doc, and as a result, it's stuff is lost or is missing. But something I'm actually working through 2 projects at the minute, and I'd quite like to catch up with you, perhaps offline, to use what you've got as an example of what I could do, because it took 3.5 days to go through what they sent to see whether it tied up with what I had in my checklist. So if you've got something that takes seconds or minutes, fantastic. I'm all over it.
Absolutely brilliant. Okay, I'll speak. If anybody else has got an O&M or handover information that you need to validate, then let us know, and we'll see what we can do. Yeah. So because what we're now looking to do is to really test this out in a more aggressive way.
Yeah, I would like to just explain what I did to create the instruction set, because that looks like a really complicated, long instruction set. We already had instructions as to what the O&M checkers had to look for, which meant that I could feed that and create the instruction set that the LLM could then use. That was a great advantage. And if anybody's got, this is the instruction set I want, yeah, we can create the instruction set that's suitable for the LLM. And it's understanding those processes. That one to do with the file dump, that literally took me a few minutes to actually write the program, because I just thought this is just so easy to do. It produces a spreadsheet, and I thought, can we just let people know how they can do this? And then the second,
only easy if you know how, Tim.
Yeah, knowledge is power, or soft power. And the other one was the simple. What is the simple low-hanging fruit? Here's a spreadsheet of files that they say they've provided. How easy is it to check that they did? And literally, because the data dump analysis just produces a spreadsheet of all the files and everything, you can say compare spreadsheet A with spreadsheet B. Tell me the gaps. And the other, there are some nuances. So, for instance, with a lot of the drawing registers, they did use the nomenclature of the standard for the BS 119. What is it, 950 or whatever it is, and that made it easy, because what happens when you get from a CDE is you get the file name appended with the description. So what you're doing is you're looking for something that starts with this, because the drawing register that they'll provide separates out just the drawing number from the description. So once you know those things, it's easy. It really, really is easy. George doesn't like me saying that word, but there are some really low-hanging fruits things which will just make people's initial kickback, and it's a bit adversarial. But if you can kick back within 5 minutes of receiving something, they're going to think twice about how you're doing it, particularly if you give them the report as well. And I think, what I said to George was that, well, if they can use it, why can't the contractors use it? Why can't they check their own stuff before they send it out? And that is important. If you've got something, it's all right having a policeman that goes around and beats people over, arrests people. But what you really want is you want something that mentors people and that give them the tools so that contractors can mentor their subcontractors, rather than it being, it's not my job. I've done my bit, but it may not tie with your bit. That's not my problem. Is that, collectively, there should be, they present themselves as being a team, now start to play like one. Maybe that's what we should be saying.
Justin.
Just quickly, yeah, on top of what Tim said, policing it. I've worked in a situation before where certain behaviours are sort of addressed through KPIs, key performance indicators. I just wonder if that can be introduced into a scenario where somebody senior, let's say, to the people that are just passing off information without checking it, that becomes a KPI focus. And I don't know, it's just an idea.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we are doing, and this is part of the benefits or the risks thing that Pav was mentioning earlier, is to look at this from the point of view of what information is actually being collected, why is it being collected, and where is it in the process, and then how do we, in fact, I'll just show you that very briefly. I appreciate that we're running over, but people can leave when they need to. So what we're doing, this is what the group is doing at the moment. We've broken the activities that are involved in the golden thread down into these sections. So for a new build, making sure that you coordinate the information requirements, capture the information, capture product data, because product passports are going to be important. So these activities, and then these activities going forward are for the asset management side of things. But what we've then done is looked at that from a point of view of what is it that they're actually doing. So why are you collecting all the information? So why is that important, and what's the value of that? So we've got the fire safety team from yesterday. They're going to get involved in this. So if you're interested in getting involved in this, these are this is the value, in particular, Justin, this is the value that you're doing as to what those activities are. And then we can then come up with some cost savings that can then be pushed up the line to people. So if you're interested in that risk management side of things or benefit side of things, put that in the chat and we'll invite you along.
Put next steps in the chat.
Sorry.
Next steps in the chat. At this point, can I run through quickly
before
everybody leaves what we're recruiting for?
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've got various groups. If you're interested in schools, put schools in the chat. If you're interested in healthcare, put healthcare in the chat. Likewise, residential. We're also looking for projects that may have been completed and you consider to be good, but the client isn't using. Gordon gave a very good example earlier on, where they supplied a client and it took 9 years for them to actually look at it. What we do tend to do after these meetings is we will contact a select group for a one-to-one, maybe just a 15-20 minute chat, just to get a handle on their expertise and what they're particularly interested in. So you may be a lucky loser. So sign up to any of those: healthcare, schools, residential, in the chat. And we've had risk. Sign up for that if you're interested in bringing some value and on the golden thread. And if you're interested in actually getting some figures going, put next steps in the chat. Brilliant.
Kevin, could you send me your updated contact details?
I can, Judge, yeah. I'm still working on them at the moment, but I can send them once I've finished them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having a chat with you actually offline about some of the things that I think we can talk about together.
Of course. No, but I'd welcome that. Good. Okay. Well, I hope people find it's been helpful today. As I say, it's gone off slightly differently than I was expecting it, but I think that was a good thing, really, because we got some really good input from everybody actually on the call, and I hope that you're happy with it, and we can catch up. Whether you're coming along to next week's, we've got the forum meeting next week, which is on Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Good.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.